we don't want to talk about sex on our work phone. But also because, you know, it's nice to get away from stuff, isn't it? It's nice to put your work phone away. It's just nice, it's just different. So tone of voice is important. Tone of voice for organisations is important. Organisational tone of voice stands up here with a suit and tie and tells you what to do, quite often. Social tone of voice is more likely alongside you. It's different. And in learning design, it's really important. What tone of voice are we using? Where does the authenticity come from? Lots of people presenting today have been using stories. And they've been talking about their experiences. And that gives it some kind of authenticity. If they've been there and done it, it gives you some kind of authenticity. That's social authority, is the authenticity. So if we write a scenario in learning, which we used to do all the time, make up some scenarios. Here's George and here's Mary, and they're happy now. It's not very authentic, you know. Used to do diversity training like this. You know, make up these stories. Oh God, I've written some dreadful diversity training back in the day when you have to do it. And but the good news is I've seen some even worse that other people have wrote. So it's but you used to do it. You know, hello John, hello Mary. You know, puts hand on breast. It's like that's not the real world. It's not authentic. It's not real. We all know what's right. We all know what's wrong. It's hard to write stories that are authentic. It's very hard to write authentic stories. That's why quite a lot of behavioural training in organisations is utterly worthless, because it just covers the blindingly obvious and it doesn't cover the nuance. You have to have effective stories if you want learning to be effective, authentic stories if learning is going to be effective. Because if you never get beyond the really obvious, then you're not achieving anything, other than you're all sitting in a room for a day and watching some videos and passing. But pass and fail isn't the measure of success. Effective is the measure of success. And I think increasingly we're seeing, I think a lot of the drivers behind social learning approaches are to do with effectiveness, because social learning takes us out of this kind of abstract formal environment right back into the workplace. So really it's the conversations we're still having in 3 weeks' time which are relevant, which can help us be more effective. So storytelling, choosing the right genre. You know, many times organisations just default. They default because brand guidelines tell them to default to something. It has, oh yeah, but it has to have a great background, because that's our brand. Well, you know, when I watch Doctor Who, it doesn't come with the BBC One logo branded across the back of it. It's got its own identity, colour scheme, palette of colours. Has its own identity, and it's great. Who likes Doctor Who? Am I alone? Yes, thank God. I did this before and nobody liked Doctor Who. It's really sad. But it has a feel, you know, it has its own style. A visual style, style of language, in-jokes, self-referencing, all of that subtlety that we get. Americans often, in UK we often have one writer. In comedy, in drama, it's often written by one person. Americans do it in teams usually, like Friends had about 15 writers, staff writers that all work together on it. It's different, gives it a different type of feel. I quite like our approach. So storytelling is important, but narratives, there's other applications of narrative. So one of the things I really love doing at the moment is talking about narrative in learning. So we have personal narratives. We build our personal narrative in the moment. So for me, a personal narrative is my blog and it's Twitter. They're not very reflective, they're immediate, personal narratives. We then co-create group narratives. So what we do when we're talking together between sessions, we're co-creating narratives. And then organisations have high-level organisational narratives, which overarch everything. But organisations often start, especially around times of change, they start with the organisational narrative, telling everyone where they're going to be. But that's not how it works. Change happens through individual change, through to sharing this and permeating it through the group. So if we relate that into things we've already talked about, nodes and amplifiers and networks, social authority and reputation, as opposed to the voice of the man and a formal channel. If you want to affect change, you need to start with personal narrative. Personal relevance is about the context. It's about the context. Is it relevant to me? So very often organisational change fails because it's just not relevant to me. I work in the post room, I'm still going to work in the post room. I'll take your stupid test, but it's not really relevant to me. So we can think about this. This can actually inform our learning design. So we start with a story about my nephew, establishing commonality, and we end up with how do you re-engineer the NHS, which is about creating space for personal stories. Personal stories of change. That's why the Healthcare Radical campaign is effective. It's because it's about personal stories of change. The organisation has created a mechanism facilitated by technology that lets people share personal stories. or I see people queuing up in this department every week, so I've done something about it. So the technology lets them tell their stories. The social element lets us celebrate their success. I see that too. Well done you, good for you, I vote you up, whatever it is. I recognise it. Gives you some kind of validation, and it's authentic validation. Because it's not the organisation telling you you've done well, it's other people telling you you've done well.
But you get that too with people favouriting tweets. That it used to be a favourite was something that you went back and had a look at. But I've noticed more recently, people are now favouriting things to say, a bit like the like button on Facebook.
Yeah, I favourite tweets to show people that I've heard what they say. I might not want to engage back again, because I don't want to get a big conversation about it or whatever, or you don't want to clutter your feed altogether, whatever it is. But sometimes you say, I agree, I empathise, well done you. Interesting how we use it. We use the technology to do that. Reinforces those new social bonds, of course. So personal narrative sits at the heart of it. The co-created group narrative is the community part. Communities are what drive change. And that's interesting. Because once you unleash communities, you can't easily put them back in the box again. And of course the community has nothing whatsoever to do with a specific technology. It's facilitated by technologies. But just because you own it, just because you bought it and paid for it and have a license fee for it and an SLA is entirely irrelevant. Things which are relevant to individuals are the ease of engagement, just effortlessly social. It's easy for me to go onto Facebook and share stuff. It's difficult to do other things. So I'm just going to go to the easy space, especially if you're all there as well. That's why we're all on Twitter and sharing stuff on Twitter, because it's just easy. If it was like an LPI system, would we do the same? Some of us would, some of us wouldn't. Because it would still have this formal sort of layer around it and identity. So levels of narrative I think are really powerful. When I talk to people, I was doing some work with some instructional designers on a course in America, and they were like, what's the most important thing we need to learn? And they wanted me to say lectorial or captivate, so that's storytelling. And he was just like, Cressler's face fell. It's like, what do you mean storytelling? But that's the most important thing. Telling stories is the most important thing in learning. Building, establishing commonality, getting momentum behind stories. Those obnoxious stories that we saw, or the stories of people standing up to it, are powerful because they've got high authenticity, high authority. They make me think about my own behaviours. If we tell the right stories, they make us think about our own behaviours. They affect change, effective change. That's stories, narrative and stories. I love it. So in a lot of the work around leadership, stories sit right in the heart of it. Good leaders, effective leaders, tell great stories, and they adapt them over time. So, what else have we got? That was quite a lot, haven't we? What should we do? Leadership? Who's interested in leadership? Yeah, leadership. Yeah, it's a funny old thing. I've been guilty of producing, I didn't write it, the sort of leadership thing which came on with some rousing music, and here's a picture of Winston Churchill, and then here's a picture of the England rugby team, and let's think, how did the England rugby team get successful, and what can we learn from that? Well, we can learn from that I'm not very good at rugby. I don't care about rugby, like that's a really old model of thinking about leadership. There's leadership hiding, leading. It's the model that I'm interested in around leadership. 1/3 of it is technology. It's about technology, but it's not about the devices. It ties in actually to a lot of what we've been talking about. Narrative, storytelling, curation. How we find stuff out. The stuff we find out is the stuff we base our stories on by contextualizing it, telling the right stories to the right people at the right times, the foundation of social leadership. Sharing it widely and wisely, and that might mean just sharing it to one person rather than sharing it to everything. Organisational models of communication are often about pushing stuff out to everybody. But social sharing is about sharing the right stuff with the right people, understanding the mechanisms of engagement, understanding amplification, understanding that the manager might not be the best person, because they might have low social authority, they might have no expertise, but there'll be other people in the organisation or alongside it who will be better nodes in the network, better amplifiers of ideas. So this whole first part is about storytelling. This is about communities, internal and external. You remember we looked at those communities. What are the communities inside the organisation? The communities outside. And understanding how reputation is built. Reputation is built through sharing effective stories. If I go on Twitter and I put up like, oh, here's my lunch, very good. Oh, I'm stuck on the bus. I've got a headache. It's like, well, okay, you know, it's all very well and good. It's not that interesting. It might be relevant to me, but it's probably not that relevant to other people. You have to curate these spaces differently. I might put that on Facebook, because, you know, that's my social space. Facebook social, Twitter, I use that. I use Twitter in my sort of formal space. But I've also got a secret Twitter profile. So, because I like graffiti, so I go out and take lots of photos of graffiti. I've got my secret graffiti Twitter profile. I've got a secret graffiti blog. It has a whole following of people who don't know who I am. They don't know my name, they don't know anything about me. I share graffiti from all over the world on there. Different space, I curate it separately. Does it have authority? Maybe it has authority, it might have integrity. Maybe it would lose that integrity if I said who I was. I don't know, but it's based on different foundations. And you see, identity is fluid online. I mean, there's bad issues of identity being fluid online, so you know, who knows if you've got children, they're in a chat room, they're talking to a 12-year-old girl in Birmingham, who knows? It's 40-year-old, fat lorry driver in Mississippi. It's identity, it's fluid online. Notions of the real world don't translate into the social spaces. But there are good things as well, because we can go and make our mistakes somewhere. So lots of organisations insist, quite rightly so, that your identity in social learning spaces is your real identity, or is traceable back to you. But people exhibit different behaviours once they're separated from their actual identity, usually, not always. A lot of people exhibit different behaviours. I was quite interested in doing some, I'll just tell this story which I know Leslie said before about a friend in the Metropolitan Police. In the Metropolitan Police, wanting to get into the police. She's 30, turned 30 this year, been working hard to get into the police for a long time. And finally got in. Through the backdoor route, she became a community support officer, and then got in. And she was going through induction, and they're doing this exercise in the room about stereotyping, showing pictures of people, how we stereotype people. Here's somebody in a hoodie, black 14-year-old in a hoodie. What do you think? I think he's going to steal my hubcaps. Whatever it is, unconscious bias. What are we thinking? Somebody in a suit. I think he's less likely to have committed the crime. Thinking about that, but it degenerated. So 13 men in the room, 2 women, and pictures are coming up, and the men are starting to score the women. And this is like 3 months ago. This isn't in 1980. It's 3 months ago. Started to score the women and say these things they want to do to them. And so you've got an instructor, someone in a formal position of authority. You've got other inductees there. Everyone's joining in, cheering. Maybe some are cheering a bit more loudly than others, but something has given them permission to betray the values, to act differently, something about group mentality. They're not going to go home, how did it go today in your induction, son? Oh, it was great. I saw this woman and I said, this and that about her. They're not going to do that. Maybe 1 or 2 people would, but not 13 people. So how did that happen? So we often see those behaviours can be liberated online. The person who wrote that really offensive tweet to Caroline probably wouldn't say it to her face, probably wouldn't say it to a friend, but feels empowered, because that's not their real identity. I forget what they're called, licorice something. It's not their real identity. They make up identities. Just go and register a new Google address, create a new identity, go and swear at some people, be offensive. It's liberating. Sometimes it happens in the real world as well, but it's interesting. The ties between identity and behaviour. So on that cheerful note, community reputation based on our behaviours. But it can be different in social world. And social authority is based on reputation within communities. And then technology. This is the interesting stuff. Because this isn't all about the great stuff it can do. Co-creation, co-creative processes. Social leaders facilitate co-creative processes. They don't tell people what the story is, they work with communities. Some of those formal communities, some social communities, to create meaning. Social capital is about looking after people. It's about ensuring nobody is disenfranchised through culture, through ethics, through discrimination. Social capital is really, it has to go hand in hand with the technology. If we're going to unleash the technology with all of its power for good and evil, we have to have a conscience around it. We have to decide what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and how are we going to stand up for that. Now how's somebody else, and that's how some set of rules going to make it right. But in that group of people in the Met Police, how is that person in the room going to make it right? What's their permission to do that? Where's their permission to be brave? How are they going to be supported when they are brave? Why does my friend ring me to say I'm quitting? because I can't put up with this. Because at the end of that session, one of the people in the room texted her a naked photo. And he did that because he knows she's in a same-sex relationship. Probably makes it worse, I don't know, does that make it worse? It's pretty offensive, isn't it? However it happens. 3 months ago, in the Metropolitan Police, which is always in the news for being institutionally racist and having these problems with its culture. That's quite worrying. So the technology is insidious there. It's facilitating those behaviours. Somehow it's giving people permission. But it can do good things as well. We have to think about it. We have to include social capital and equality. It has to sit within a model of leadership. It doesn't belong to a compliance team or somebody else. It belongs to us all. But collaboration is like at the top of this model. So collaborating through the technology, collaborating effectively in our organisation with our teams and out in other areas. So I see this is one of the areas I'm trying to draw together all these ideas into one place. Technology is in it, but it doesn't drive it. It's not a system. You buy a system to give you great leadership, any more than you buy a learning management system to give you great learning. It's just about how it facilitates us to tell our stories and to engage in communities. So it's been a very rambling session, you see. I hope that's all right. I could have just come here and told you some stuff, which I probably did, but I'd like to explore these things. So I think we've got maybe 10 minutes, something thereabouts. So anything you like. Yes, you can have a golden glass. Which one? Castle? Yeah, Tower. Let me remind myself what this is. So this is about, let me make it a bit bigger. I'm trying to remember which article this one's from. So this is about, can I see it? Yeah, so this is about things sort of storming the bastions of formal organisations. This is what's driving the change. Plenty of organisations are sort of touching on the edge of this. But outside, all of these things are eroding their viability. This is why plenty of the big names that we see today, big organisations that we see today, are going to be gone. They're going to be the Woolworths of tomorrow. It's a badge to wear with pride. The half-life of lethargy. You used to be able to just not worry about stuff so much. Oh yeah, the world's changing, but so what? PayPal came along and fully subverted the model of Visa and MasterCard and banking. We've got a